Hey, welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping into something genuinely complex today and pretty controversial, too. It's all based on an article you shared with us from NPO Start NOS News. Our mission, for this deep dive is to take that source material and really try to untangle the details and the disputes around this specific aid plan for Gaza. It's backed by the U.S. and Israel, and right away the article kind of zeroes in on the main tension, doesn't it? This plan is reportedly moving forward, but according to the source, it's largely bypassing the big, established international aid organizations. So the big questions the article brings up are, well, why? Why is this happening? And what could the implications actually be for getting aid where it's needed?
Yeah, and to really get a handle on the friction points the article highlights, it helps to remember those core principles that usually guide humanitarian aid. Humanity, neutrality, impartiality, independence. This plan, as the source describes it, really brings those principles into sharp focus, raises some big questions, according to the groups quoted.
Absolutely. And the article flags some really specific things, almost surprising details about this plan that we need to dig into, like the number of distribution points they're planning, this idea of using periodic aid boxes, and yeah, even the reported potential use of face recognition tech.
We'll also look at why, based on the article, those major aid groups are reportedly hesitant or even, outright refusing to cooperate, and what specific criticisms are being raised, not just by them, but others too. We're talking perspectives from the GHF itself, its former head, actually, and key groups mentioned like OCHA, Oxfam Novib, UNICEF, plus reported statements from officials like Premier Netanyahu and the U.S. ambassador. It's quite a lot to unpack.
Definitely. So let's dive in. Okay, let's start with the main player the source identifies, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. Article says it was recently set up in Geneva, describes it as still being quite opaque. What else does the source say about its stated purpose?
Well, according to the reporting, the basic idea, the core of the GHF-driven plan, is setting up these fixed distribution points inside Gaza for aid. The article describes U.S. private companies handling the transport and, importantly, securing these sites. And the initial idea, reportedly, was that established aid organizations would then do the actual distribution, food, water, hygiene kits, that kind of thing.
Okay, but that's exactly where the controversy kicks in immediately, right? The article really emphasizes that the major established international aid groups are, reportedly, not playing ball, not cooperating. Why? What reasons do they give?
The reasons cited in the article coming from these aid groups are pretty blunt. They say participating means the whole aid operation loses its independence. That's crucial. Another big worry they raise is that the plan could, effectively push Palestinians to leave certain parts of Gaza. The article even includes some very pointed quotes. Tom Fletcher, head of the UN aid body OCHA, reportedly called it a cynical sideshow and conscious diversion maneuver. Strong words. And significantly, Israeli Premier Netanyahu is reportedly quoted describing this GHF initiative as a means to win the war.
Okay, means to win the war. Those are really strong statements reported in the source. It makes you look much closer at the GHF itself. And the article mentions a big development there, the head, Jake Wood. He recently resigned. What did the source say about why he left?
That's a really key piece of information in the article, yeah. The source includes what Jake Wood reportedly said when he stepped down, and it directly echoes what the aid groups were concerned about. He reportedly said, and this is a quote from the source, "This plan cannot be implemented without violating the humanitarian principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence."
So the former head himself is saying it violates the core principles.
Exactly. That statement really underlines the fundamental conflict being reported here.
Okay, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the plan. Based on the article, these distribution points, how many? And where are they supposedly located?
So the plan, as the source describes it, initially talked about 4 distribution points. The stated capacity sounds pretty big, 300,000 people per point, so aiming for a total capacity of about 1.2 million people.
Okay.
Now, according to the article, which cites BBC reporting using satellite images, construction was actually seen at 4 sites. 3 were way down south near Rafah, and 1 was more in the middle of Gaza, in the Wadi Gaza area that's also known as the Netzarim corridor.
Right.
And the article makes a specific point. All these locations are close to existing Israeli army posts.
Okay, and this is where the article brings up a major sort of practical problem that ties back to those earlier criticisms. This capacity, 1.2 million people, just 4 points.
Yeah.
What's the issue there, based on the numbers the source lays out?
Well, the article highlights a pretty significant gap. If you do some rough math based on the figures in the source, over 50,000 reported deaths,
Hmm.
maybe 150,000 to 200,000 people having left Gaza. The source estimates there are still at least 1.9 million Palestinians remaining inside Gaza.
Yeah, 1.9 million still there.
Right. So with the 4 points only set up to handle about 1.2 million as reported, well, that leaves a reported shortfall of at least 700,000 people. They're just not covered by the plan's current setup.
And the article directly connects that numbers gap to the criticism we heard earlier.
Yeah.
Right? That having so few points essentially forces people to move, to leave areas, especially in the north, where there's no aid coming through the system.
That's exactly right, according to the source's reporting. This situation is reportedly seen by critics as, well, using aid distribution as a tool, a factor in potentially depopulating certain areas of Gaza. And the article notes this view aligns with statements Israeli officials have reportedly made about their objectives.
Oh.
There's a particularly stark quote on this from Myrte Bosch of Oxfam Novib in the article. She reportedly said, in effect, you're using aid as a means to ethnically cleanse areas.
Ethnically cleanse. That's incredibly strong language. Did the GHF, before Jake Wood resigned, did they talk about maybe opening more points, maybe in the north?
The article does mention that, yes. In a CNN interview cited in the source, Jake Wood apparently said there were plans to potentially expand. Maybe 8 or 10 points in total, possibly including spots further north.
Okay, so there was talk of expansion.
Talk, yes. But the article also points out that the same BBC satellite search mentioned earlier reportedly found no evidence of construction starting on more than those initial 4 sites, at least at the time of the report.
Right. Okay, stepping back a bit. Another huge issue that aid organizations raise in the source is this reported lack of independence for the whole operation.
Yeah, this is really a core concern detailed in the article. The GHF is reportedly backed by the U.S. and Israel. It's implementing their plan, essentially. And according to the source, this setup is seen as giving Israel significant power over who actually gets the aid. Critics quoted in the article frame this as reinforcing the potential use of aid as a weapon.
Aid as a weapon.
Which, the article stresses, directly goes against that fundamental humanitarian principle that aid must be independent and neutral, separate from any political or military goals.
It sounds like there's even conflicting information within the source itself about what role Israel is actually supposed to play in the distribution. What did the article report on that?
Yeah, the article highlights these different accounts, which is really interesting. You have Jake Wood, the former GHF head, reportedly denying in that CNN interview that Israel would be involved in the distribution part.
Okay, no distribution role, according to him.
But then the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, is reported as saying Israel would have a role specifically in securing the distribution.
Securing, not distributing. Okay, a difference there.
A difference, yeah. And then adding another layer, Premier Netanyahu reportedly stated quite plainly that this new system is basically a military tool and that Israel will keep control over the whole operation.
So, direct contradiction there.
Pretty much. The article points out these varying nuances and, yeah, direct conflicts in the reported statements from the different parties involved.
This leads us to another really controversial point the source flags. This reported use of face recognition technology. Tell us about that.
Yes, the article goes into some detail on the significant concerns around this. Reportedly, the idea is that it would help ensure, fair and equal distribution of these periodic aid boxes. Everyone gets their share, supposedly.
Okay, sounds logical on the surface, maybe.
Maybe. But the article immediately raises red flags. It notes Israel already uses face recognition tech in Gaza. And there have been reports, it mentions one from the New York Times, of this tech sometimes misidentifying ordinary civilians as militants.
Oh, wow. That's a serious issue.
It is, and James Elder from UNICEF is quoted in the article expressing really strong caution. He reportedly warned that making face recognition a condition for getting aid goes against all humanitarian principles. Why? Because the beneficiaries could potentially be screened for military intelligence purposes while they're just trying to get essential supplies.
I see. So using aid access as a potential intelligence gathering tool.
That's the concern raised. The article also notes an interesting point about Jake Wood's position before he left. He reportedly denied the GHF would share face recognition data with Israel. But importantly, he reportedly did not deny that the technology itself would be used as part of the process.
So the tech is in play, just maybe not the data sharing. Still raises questions. Okay, what reason does Israel itself reportedly give for wanting to take over aid distribution like this? Why bypass the existing systems?
According to the source, the justification Israel puts forward is the claim that a significant amount of the aid currently going into Gaza allegedly ends up diverted, falling into the hands of Hamas.
Right, we've heard that claim reported before. How do the established aid organizations respond to that specific point about diversion, according to the article?
Well, the article indicates they really push back strongly against that narrative. They reportedly say there's just no solid evidence of aid being diverted on any kind of significant scale.
No evidence of large-scale diversion.
Right. The source quotes Jens Lyric, an OCHA spokesperson, saying something like, I can't be 100% certain absolutely no aid is diverted, nobody can anywhere. But, he reportedly continued, it is certainly not happening on a scale that justifies halting an entire life-saving operation.
That seems pretty clear.
And OCHA head Tom Fletcher also reportedly stated, we have strict mechanisms to ensure our aid reaches civilians and not Hamas. He then reportedly added that Israel's actions, like denying access to aid groups, suggest that other goals, maybe like depopulation, are being prioritized over civilian lives.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together based on what the article presents. We've got this new aid plan, reportedly backed by the U.S. and Israel, that seems to be bypassing the traditional big international aid players. It involves controversial tech, like face recognition. It's raising huge questions about independence, about whether it's tied to military goals. And it's facing major criticism, not just from those established aid groups, but as the source reports, even from its own former leader.
Yeah, what's really striking when you look at the source paints is this complex web of reported tensions and conflicting stories. You see this clash, right, between the stated goals of the plan and how aid groups perceive the likely outcomes, between the technical details like distribution points and these core humanitarian principles. And, as we discussed, these conflicting statements reported from various parties about who's actually in control, about Israel's role. The article really lays out a layered and very complex situation.
So we've taken a deep dive into this specific article, looking at this proposed U.S.-Israeli aid plan in Gaza. We've looked at the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. We've examined the significant criticisms reported from major international aid organizations, and even the former head of the GHF itself. We've gotten into the details of the plan as described, the distribution points, the capacity issues, that controversial use of face recognition tech, and we've touched on the differing narratives presented in the source about things like aid diversion and who really controls the process.
Yeah, and we've seen how the source reports that those really crucial humanitarian principles, independence, neutrality, are widely seen as being put at risk by this plan, according to the people and groups quoted.
And how those practical challenges, like the limited number of distribution points the article describes, and the ethical questions reported around tech, like face recognition, how they raise fundamental concerns about whether this plan can actually be effective and what its impact might be, again, according to those cited.
It's just really clear from the source material that trying to deliver humanitarian aid in these extremely complex, high-conflict zones means navigating these immense challenges. You've got deeply conflicting interests and often very different perspectives on the best, most ethical way to actually reach the people who need help, all while trying somehow to uphold those core humanitarian principles.
Absolutely. So here's a final thought we want to leave you with, something to maybe chew on, based only on what we've explored today from this one source article. If those traditional structures for delivering independent aid are reportedly being sidelined in this specific situation, what alternative models, drawing only from the dynamics and the challenges presented right here in this article, could possibly succeed? Could they deliver genuinely effective, truly impartial help in such a high-conflict zone without getting tangled up in the political or military aims of the parties involved? Something to think about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks. We hope this exploration of the source material has helped clarify some of the complexities reported in this situation for you.